And a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. On this week's show, we delve into the economic and political dissatisfaction behind Jordan's protests, which have led to King Abdullah appointing a new prime minister. The secret history of Israel's targeted assassinations. Investigative journalist Ronen Bergman joins us from Tel Aviv to talk about his latest bestseller. Also coming up, fashion and politics. Vogue Arabia under fire for its front cover of a Saudi princess driving. This at a time when the conservative kingdom is jailing women's rights activists who for years fought for the right to drive. That's all coming up, but first to Jordan, where Prime Minister Hani Mulki resigned on Monday. This amid widespread anger over unpopular austerity measures and high living costs. But it seems the move wasn't enough to satisfy a growing anti-government movement in the financially struggling country.
It was a move Jordanian authorities hoped would quell the biggest protests in years. But despite Prime Minister Hani Mulki's resignation on Monday, crowds gathered outside his office once again. Pushed away by riot police, they continued their stand against a planned tax hike, austerity measures and corruption.
After the resignation of Prime Minister Hani Mulki, this is not the main demand of the people. The people are demanding real economic reform.
There are cases and politicians that were not held accountable, and the people are waiting for it to be resolved.
It all started with the government feeling pressure from the IMF to push through economic reforms after the body lent the kingdom over 600 million euros in 2016 across a 3-year program. In exchange, Jordan was supposed to rein in its public debt. To this end, the government's planning a 5% tax increase on individuals. As for businesses, they're looking at a 20 to 40% hike. King Abdullah II has chosen Education Minister Omar Razaz as replacement Prime Minister, tasking him with forming a new government. A former World Bank economist, his appointment would send a positive message to the IMF, though officials said he was opposed to reforms hurting the poor. Razaz has his work cut out calming rising anger amongst the working and middle classes, who say they're getting no services in turn for their taxes.
It used to be easier. Price hikes are too high. People can barely eat and drink these days.
This year is the worst so far. I can no longer afford even basic expenses. I'm thinking of selling our cattle, but how can I live without them? I have neither a salary nor support from the government. We are barely surviving.
Unemployment has now risen above 18% and is thought to be double that for young people. Since the start of the year, bread subsidies have been wiped, the price of petrol hiked up 5 times, and electricity bills have doubled. The king promised change, saying the poor shouldn't bear the brunt of the crisis, though gave no specifics on possible reforms.
Turning now to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who kicked off a 3-day tour to Europe this Monday to persuade the leaders of Germany, France and the UK to scrap the Iran nuclear deal. Also on the agenda, Tehran's regional behaviour, including its presence in Syria. Iran, meanwhile, has informed the UN nuclear watchdog that it will increase its nuclear enrichment capacity now that the US has withdrawn from the accord. And that takes us to this week's special guest, journalist Ronen Bergman, who joins us from Tel Aviv to talk about his book, Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. The New York Times bestseller sheds light on the extreme measures adopted by Israel to protect itself. Ronen, thank you very much for speaking to us here on Middle East Matters. Tell us about how this project came together. Your book was 8 years in the making. You conducted hundreds of interviews and read through thousands of pages of documents.
The reason why it took so long was it's very, very hard to write a book about the history of arguably the most secretive organization on earth, the Israeli Mossad, and its secret operation, and at the peak of that, Israeli use of assassination and targeted killing. And I have written the book because I think that there's no way to understand not just the history of Israeli intelligence, as interesting as it is, but understand the history of Israel and the history of the region without first getting the facts right on the history, the secret history of Israeli intelligence, which has I would say, a secret but profound impact on how events occurred and developed in the last 70 years since Israel was established.
I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise that some officials in the country have since tried to somewhat discredit you and your book because, of course, this targeted assassination program was not meant for public consumption, was it?
No, not at all. But I don't think, in fact, I know that no one challenged the facts. People could say that this is, and we received all sorts of criticism. Some pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab media outlets said that this is an Israeli propaganda, aims just to glorify the Mossad. Some right-wing media in Israel said that this is a left-wing, radical, anti-Israeli propaganda. And you know, when you are attacked so severely from all sides, that probably means that you have done something right.
Why was there such an obsession with assassinating PLO leader Yasser Arafat?
As much as Israel got sunk into the quicksand of Lebanon in its invasion to this country, Prime Minister Begin and Minister of Defense Sharon wanted more than anything else to kill Yasser Arafat. They thought that if they kill him, they would kill the Palestinian problem, which is one of the main problems with targeted killings. You kill a leader and you think you kill the problem, which, you know, in most of the cases, and not all of them, turn out to be a mistake. And it evolved into an obsession of Minister of Defense Sharon, until he even ordered to take down an airplane with civilians and innocent people just in order to kill Yasser Arafat on board. However, courageous senior and junior officers of the IDF and the Israeli Air Force refused that order. They practically declared mutiny against Sharon and said, we are not going to do this. They did not challenge the legitimacy of killing Arafat. They thought that Arafat could be or should be killed, but they said, we are not going to kill civilians. So we are talking about the story about an obsessed Ministry of Defense, but at the same time, also people in the military who did whatever they could and stood firm against a very charismatic minister to make sure that they keep the code of ethics and the rule and conduct of war of the IDF.
Now, you write about the assassinations of Hamas rings, attacks on PLO targets, as we just talked about that, the killings of Iranian nuclear scientists, over 2,700 operations in Israel's modern history. Is this lethal technique, in your opinion, effective in deterring, quote, terrorism?
The conclusion of the research of this voyage journey of the last 8 years is that when targeted killing are done against the operative level, when it's done systematically as a part of an overall strategy, when it's done against these people who are the threat and not the people that could be killed, and when it's not done as a sort of a measure to show your public that you are doing something, the result and the lesson is that yes, it in some cases very effective.
Ronen, shouldn't there be a difference, certainly from a moral standpoint, because these Iranian nuclear scientists don't fall under the terrorist category that these assassinations claim to target?
Well, there is a difficulty here. The Iranian nuclear scientists were not part of a terrorist operation. They were part of a scientific military project of a sovereign state. And what they did was part of their job for their country. On the other hand, they were part of a secret nuclear project aiming at acquiring nuclear weapon of a country that calls for the destruction of Israel and doing a lot in order to kill Israelis and harm Israeli national security.
And would you say that these attacks are legal within the international framework?
Well, I would assume that if these actions are brought to some of the jurists, they would say that killing a terrorist, even when he's off work at bed at night, is legal. And I would assume that killing a nuclear scientist working for a sovereign state would be seen by the international law experts as illegal.
Ronen Bergman, thank you for speaking to us here on France 24 about your book, Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. It's a real page-turner. Now, fashion and politics have long been linked. This time it's the front cover of Vogue Arabia, showing a Saudi princess behind the wheel that's been getting attention. The Middle East edition of Vogue magazine ran with the celebration of the trailblazing women of Saudi Arabia. This at a time when a dozen women's rights activists continue to be behind bars in the conservative kingdom. Critics say the issue is tone deaf. Others complain the princess didn't deserve to be on the cover. Now, earlier this week, ahead of the lift of a ban on women driving, a group of some 10 women received their driver's licenses. The ban is due to be lifted on June 24th. Well, that's it for this edition of Middle East Matters. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can visit our Facebook page, Middle East Matters France 24, or Twitter. Thank you for watching.